Namaste. Welcome to the talks on the yogic view of self. This is the third talk in series. In the earlier two talks, in the first talk, the speaker introduced the topic. The speaker has already said that the talks are based on the article that he has written and published in the anthology titled Plato's Dialogues. Um, in the second talk, the speaker has raised fundamental questions: what is self? And he began with the first question: the body. Are we the body? The speaker has not answered the question firmly. Instead, he has presented the facts and left the entire thought to the imagination of the listeners. But the question remains as it is: are we the body? We are not the body if we say it, because it is not permanent. It keeps changing. As it keeps changing, one day it has to perish, and it perishes and leaves this world with no traces. But then the confusion arises when the speaker has raised the question: when we existed 5 years ago, and do we exist now? We also exist today. We existed 5 years ago, or we existed yesterday and we are existing now. But then the body that existed yesterday or 5 years ago is not the same as the body that exists now. But the body is there. The only the visible point, perhaps it is invisible to the human eye, as we are clouded by our own series of experiences, our samskaras, vasanas, our karmas, and so on. We are not able to see this perceptible change in the matter, in the body. So therefore, this confusion arises. And the body that existed 5 years ago or yesterday is not the same the body that exists right now. But we recognize the fact that the body is there, but it undergoes some change. But this change also is not permanent in respect of the body, because one day this change must lead to a total extinction of the body. Therefore, the confusion again arises to the question: are we the body? Because we are discussing the question: what is self? And if we are not the body, then what is self? We are not the body in terms of its impermanence, and therefore we are not the body. We are not the body because the body doesn't exist in all times, in all situations, the same. It doesn't exist in the same form in all times, in all situations. So it keeps changing. So changing is its fundamental property. But this changing in relation to the human body is not permanent because, as the speaker has said, eventually it leads to the total perishment. So one day the body has to perish, it has to be burnt or buried. So therefore, the question remains, are we the body? So let's keep this question until the end of this series of talks. And listeners will definitely come to know what we are exactly discussing and how we can arrive at a point of understanding where we can dispel the confusion that arises from the question, what is self? In today's talk, the speaker would like to take two more aspects of the self. The one is brain, the other is mind. Brain and mind are often confused by all of us. Brain and mind are not the same. Brain is that complex mechanism organ, complex organ that exists within this body, and it is located in the human skull. It comprises billions of cells, neurons, and non-neuron cells. Now, the brain is not to be confused with the mind. The brain is in some form, it's a solid form. Though you may not see it, but it is there in the skull, and one can see others' brain. So this is the part of the human anatomy. Is the most important organ of the human body because it is a manufacturing unit. It is here the thought is produced. The, the messages taken from the sense organs are subjected to a sort of chemical process in the brain cells, and finally, the message comes out in the form of a thought or an idea. Say, so the brain is a processing agency. It's a complex mechanism because it involves processing the data carried by the sense organs. This brain that is found in the human skull weighs 2% of the total weight of the human body. An average adult of the average adult's human brain weighs 1.5 kgs, and it comprises 85 billions of neurons and 86 billions of non-neuron cells. You can imagine the composition of this brain that is in such organ, the whole processing of the data carried by the sense organs. takes place. So the brain is a processing agent. It is not to be confused with mind. It's only a processing agent. As the speaker has already said that it's here in the billions of cells. The data is subjected to a process of change. Now, according to the neuroscientists, this brain is also matter. It also undergoes change like the body because it is a part of human body. As the body undergoes change, as we have already learned in our previous talk, the brain also undergoes change. The neuron scientists say that every 3 days, millions of cells die and then new cells are created. So, therefore, the brain is also not constant. It also changes along with this form. So, it is never constant. Its feature is impermanence. As the body goes, the brain also goes with it. As the body perishes, the brain also perishes. As the body is burnt, the brain also comes to an end and it is burnt. So, since brain is a part of human body, as we have learned that body is imperishable, no, I'm sorry, body is perishable, so also the brain. So the brain need not be confused with the human body. The same characteristic features the brain also carries. And there is no fundamental difference between the brain that lives in the human skull and the body, the total body form. Then, so therefore, the question continues what is self? And we have already learned with regard to the body. The body is not the self because the body changes and perishes. And we have just now examined the state of brain, and we understand that brain also is not permanent. It also undergoes changes. It also perishes along with the body. Therefore, the brain is not the self. The body is not the self. This is what we can learn so far. But let's come to mind. Now the question arises, are we the mind? And before we answer that question, let's examine what is mind. Mind is subtle. It is invisible. Where it exists, it doesn't exist in the human skull, no, absolutely not. It exists in each and every cell of our body. Since the data is subjected to a process of change in the brain, so therefore we feel a lot of strain here, nothing else. But the mind exists in each and every cell because each and every cell is sensory. It senses. Each cell is acting. Each cell is active. Active in the sense it senses, it feels, it experiences. Therefore, the mind starts here only. The mind starts from the cell. The cell that is there in our sense organs, the skin, the smell, the seeing, everything. So each cell is a minuscule part of a mind because each cell plays vital role in transmitting the data from the external world through an experience, through a touch, through a contact. Therefore, if we ask the question, where does mind exist? Mind doesn't exist in the brain, in the skull. Many of us point out, where is the mind? We show our finger here. It is no. The mind is this. Where there is body, there is mind. The mind is body, mind is body, the body is the mind. This is the equation. The whole body is the mind. But the whole mind is not the body. Because mind doesn't have a form. The formless, it is formless. But the formless is there in the form. But it is also the other way. The form is a projection of the formless. The body is a thought. It is a projection of mind. It is a projection of thought. The thought says, I exist. The thought says, I am the body. The thought says, I am the mind. So thought functions vitally here. So the formless exists in the body, in the form, but the form emanates from the formless. This is the trick played by the mind. Though we understand that mind is formless and this formless exists in the form like body, the form is an emanation of formless. The formless is not emanation of the form. Absolutely wrong. The form emanates from the formless and goes into it. From the formless doesn't come, but from the formless, the form comes. From the state of nothingness, something emerges, and that something again goes and merges with the state of nothingness. The state of nothingness is formless. The state of something is having a form. The form emerges from the formless. So, in relation to our body, which comes first? The form first comes, and the formless comes later. But the formless plays tricks upon the form. Hope the listeners understand this particular point. But many say that they say it the other way. No, the form first arrives into this world, and then comes the mind which is formless. But the same mind which is formless plays tricks later when that formless grows along with the form. The formless here is the mind. The mind doesn't come along with the body. The body first arrives, the form first arrives, then mind is formed. Consciousness is there, form is there, but mind is not there. Mind is yet to form in the case of a just born baby. Consciousness is there, the speaker repeats. The form is there at the time of birth, but mind is not yet born there. Mind is yet to form there. This mind is invisible, It is subtle, hence it is equated with the formless. This formless forms as the form grows. Say about 8 months, when the baby reaches, the baby becomes conscious. Consciousness, conscious here in the sense, not the original consciousness the baby brings into this world, but the consciousness that the mind creates. Oh, the baby, when it reaches 8 months, it becomes conscious, not consciousness. Please note that it should not be confused with consciousness. The baby becomes conscious after attaining 8 months, conscious of its own existence, conscious of the other, conscious of the object. So it recognizes its mother, it recognizes its neighbor, it recognizes an object. Though the baby may not express it in language, but it expresses through body signs, signals, body signals, by showing the hands, by beating the legs, by beating the chest, by crying, by shouting. These are the signs that the baby shows when the recognition is formed. The recognition, that is called cognition. When the baby cognizes, then the baby gets a different consciousness there. And this consciousness is called mind's consciousness. The mind is forming there. And that mind's consciousness is different from the consciousness that the baby brings at the time of birth. Now you have three levels of consciousness. Consciousness that the baby brings at the time of birth, and the consciousness the baby acquires by means of cognition. So the mind is formed. When the mind is formed, the body also gains a consciousness. It's called body consciousness. So we have body consciousness, mind consciousness, and the consciousness, which is different, totally different. The consciousness that the baby brings is the consciousness that is the substratum of the entire creation, the substratum of the entire life. But mind consciousness is different. Body consciousness is different. Mind consciousness goes along with the body consciousness. Both will perish. This is what the listeners need to note. This is a very crucial point here. So, the mind, as the speaker has already said, is formless. The formless is formed in the form. Please note. But the formless, as the baby grows, tries to dictate the form. And as say we grow into adults, then it is not the form that speaks, it is the formless that speaks through the form. It is the formless that is thought. Thought is formless. The thought says that you are existing. The thought says you are the body. The thought says you are the mind. The thought says that you are doing everything. This is the trick that you need to understand, that the mind plays. The formless plays upon the form. Remember, the form first arrives. The formless is formed later in the form. But that formless later gains an upper hand over the form and tries to dictate the form. And it says that the form emanates from the formless. The formless says the form emanates from the formless. So the form is only an idea. The form is only a thought. Who says this? The formless says, the mind says, the thought says that. Because the body as it is cannot say that it is the body. Because the body has no language. The body has no language. Body may feel, but it has no ways to express. It has no means to express. In what form, in what way it should express. So it looks for the means, and that means here is language. But the language comes slowly and slowly. So the language, thought, thinking cannot be separated. Impossible. So the body as it is cannot express that it is body. Some agency is required to say that this is body, and that agency is mind, and that mind is formless, and that mind which is formless tells that this body is a form. So therefore we can understand this body is only a thought. The thought that is given by the formless. The formless here is mind. The mind here is a thought, a clutter of thought. Hope the readers, listeners understand this point clearly. Otherwise, we cannot proceed further. So we understand in this talk that form comes into existence first, and then formless is formed. The formless, that is mind, is formed later. But that mind takes over the entire control of the body. Though in the initial stage, the body emanates from the formless, in the later stage, the formless dictates the form. The form as it is cannot speak, cannot express. So it requires an agency. That agency is called mind. That mind is nothing but a thought or a series of thoughts. So thought says you are the body. Thought says that you are existing. Thought says you are doing this. Thought says I am doing this. I with it. This I is nothing but thought. But all those thoughts are expressed through this body, this form, this form. If the form is not there, the formless cannot express. The thought cannot express. Thought again requires a medium. The medium here is body. You see the complexity, the paradoxical situation here. So thought needs some form to express what it is. And that is body. And that is the medium. The body is the medium. So thought cannot express by itself. Thought cannot speak because thought requires something. It's nothing. You have the the automobile frame, but you need an engine. The engine can work only through the framework. So you need a body. So the thought can express itself through the form, through the body. So it requires an agency, and that is body. So it is the thought that says through the body that it is body. It is the thought that says you are doing something, I am doing something through this body. So it is the thought within the quote that works. That is the crux in today's talk. Let's continue our discussion. Thank you very much for listening.